what's on here, I'm going to have to stay in this vicinity regardless. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I will be explaining the 2008 financial crisis. A lot of people here and a lot of edgy teens on the internet love to talk about corruption in the government. But whenever you ask them an example of corruption in the government, they don't really know. They really just think that it's just old white men with scraggly white beards and scraggly white hair like our beloved Mr. Brown in a dark corner of a room just plotting against all of society. But it's actually a lot closer to home than we all think. So today I'll be talking about what were the antecedents to the crisis, what's the history behind it, how did it even come about, the bursting of this financial bubble and housing bubble that was created to actually make the crisis, and what happened to those involved, and is there any hope for us and the government in the future. So, after the Great Depression, America experienced about 40 years of economic prosperity. And this is because of the conditions that are very, very different from today's economic sector. So speculation was not allowed, and investment banks and the stock market were small and private. So somebody can't buy stocks like you do today in the real world, in the real sense. So all this changed in the 80s with investment banks going public. This created a stock system that you all know and love, even though none of you participated in it, I'm sure. And Ronald Reagan's presidency, which started 30 years of deregulation. Prior to this deregulation, banks were regulated quite heavily, and there was a lot of laws on what you can and cannot do as a bank. Oh, okay. All right. One of the major changes to the system in the 80s was the deregulation of banks, as I said before. This meant that banks can now use your money, use anybody's money that gets put in the system, and actually speculate with it. So first I have to explain what is speculation. So simply put, speculation is when you buy something in hope that you'll make a profit out of it in the future. And prior to deregulation, everybody had to do this with their own money. You couldn't, as a bank, take somebody else's money and speculate with it because it was illegal. But now in this current system, you can. So banks, the first time this was exposed to them, they made a lot of very, very bad mistakes. Many people lost their life savings, and it cost taxpayers about $124 billion. A lot of people actually got arrested for doing the wrong thing, which is shocking in today's government, actually. And one example is Charles Keaton, who played a major role in the corporation called American Continental Corporation. And the reason why he wasn't caught earlier was because he paid this economist called Alan Greenspan, remember this name because it's important, to tell people that what he was doing wasn't wrong. So where can you even see this corruption that I'm talking about? Well, one of the main focuses of this corruption is in the employees that are hired by the government. So remember Alan Greenspan, what I just said, was paid by a CEO to basically lie. He became the chairman of the Federal Reserve under both Clinton and George W. Bush. Robert Rubin, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, a major investment bank, was a Treasury Secretary under Clinton. Larry Summers was a huge investment bank supporter, and he succeeded his mentor, Robert Rubin, as the Secretary of Treasury in 1999. There are more names, but I will talk about them later. One of the huge problems on top of speculation was the consolidation of these banks. You see, before the speculation became legal, banks could not be consolidated because this meant that if a bank got way too big, that if it crashed or failed, then a lot of people would lose a lot of money. And so one instance happened where Citigroup was a major merger between Citicorp and Travelers Group. They couldn't be created under current law. So Congress passed legislation called the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act in 1999 to make sure that they could operate legally. Oh, another problem was derivatives. You see, after the Cold War, the scientists and physicists that created all the weapons that we saw in the Cold War actually dedicated their time to the financial sector. And what they came up with was this concept of a derivative. Now, these are complicated, so I will explain them as best as I possibly can. And in the simplest term, a derivative is basically any deal at all that allows one party to control that aspects of, or no, to limit risk of any outside events. So this is a very good example. A farmer grows corn, but if the price slumps at the time of the harvest, he could go bankrupt. So he buys an insurance policy, a derivative, that guarantees him a fixed price. The farmer plants his crop knowing he won't lose any money. Derivatives could also be defined as any transaction that can only occur if the terms of a contract are met beforehand. Like if the farmer is right and the prices slump, I have to give him his insurance. Now, you don't need to know the specifics, but derivatives can get really complicated really quickly because I don't necessarily have to be giving the farmer an insurance policy. You can actually put derivatives within derivatives. So pretend this is me and this is you. I have a nice top hat and you don't. So I'm within this giant box, and this box is one derivative. So that is one contract. And we are trading this next derivative, which is another mini contract. Before we meet the terms of the bigger contract, first we have to meet the terms of the smaller. And this can go on and on and on, and there were actually frauds where there wasn't any actual assets being traded, just derivatives within derivatives. Now, the major problem with derivatives isn't the fact that they exist, because that insurance policy for that farmer is definitely useful. It's the fact that they aren't regulated at all, and a built-in betting function that existed with these derivatives. Now, regulation occurs in the stock market frequently because of the fact that there's restrictions on how much money you can borrow to bet and to place in stocks. Now, where were our key players during this whole interaction? Well, they were pushing against the regulation of derivatives. Derivatives was what was giving them money, and them being regulated was going to cost them a lot of money. So, of course, they couldn't have that. In 2000, Senator Phil Gramm, who later became the vice chairman of a major banking corporation called UBS, made it illegal to regulate any derivatives. This was called the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. That's not a video, don't worry. This whole derivative stuff becomes essential when you think about why the crisis occurred in the first place, which is what I'm going to be getting to. This whole bursting of a housing and financial bubble. Well, a bubble basically means that everything was going up and up and up, and then something popped and the whole system fell apart because of major flaws. So let's add another aspect on top of everything I've been talking about. Securitization and loans. So everyone knows, or at least I hope you know, how you get a loan. You go to your local bank, you ask them for a loan, and usually they're very, decisive on who they give loans to, because you need to repay them. So this is how it was in the old system: home buyers and lenders. I pay the lender who gave me the money. Continue and play this video. Oh, actually, I can explain. Okay, so in the new system, this is what happened. Home buyers gave lenders sold mortgages to home buyers, right? And so, actually, you can play the video. You'll probably explain it. And it's also Matt Damon. He has a beautiful voice. So,
Food chain, a new system which connected trillions of dollars in mortgages and other loans with investors all over the world. When a homeowner paid their mortgage every month, the money went to their local lender. And since mortgages took decades to repay, lenders were careful. In the new system, lenders sold the mortgages to investment banks. The investment banks combined thousands of mortgages and other loans, including car loans, student loans, and credit card debt, to create complex derivatives called collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs. The investment banks then sold the CDOs to investors.
Okay, pause. No, next slide. Okay, so with this new system, nobody really cared at all. Loaners could give mortgages to anyone because they no longer lost money if the loans went bad. And investment banks didn't care at all because the more CDOs they sold, the more money they made. This led to a massive amount of increase in mortgages being sold between 2000 and 2003. The amount actually quadrupled. Bad loans were given out more and more frequently. They gave them out to people who couldn't pay back the loans in the first place. And actually, these banks preferred the worst types of loans, which are called subprime loans, and I'm not going to get into. These are given to people who they know for a fact cannot pay. And They like these loans more because they get more interest, which is more money for the banks. Now, in 2007, this is the bubble. Prices are increasing. Home prices are going up by 200%. 200%, and we're still increasing. This is because anybody could buy a house, and because anybody could buy a house, everybody owned houses, and they wanted to sell them for more and more money. Now, borrowers were borrowing, on average, the people that were buying these houses were borrowing 99.3% of the house, which means that if anything went wrong with the house at all, they could walk away and only have lost 0.7% of the money that they put into the house. Now, there was legislation against this. There was a lot of regulation that could have been put in place, and who didn't want that? Our loving boy, Alan Greenspan. He actually fought very hard against this legislation. Now, to continue their revenue stream, which came instantly, banks borrowed more and more money from the government to buy more CDOs and to sell them to their customers. These companies gave out huge cash bonuses. Lehman Brothers, one of the biggest companies, owned 6 private jets and 1 helicopter for their major players. The top 5 executives made $1 billion between 2000 and 2007. And now it gets even more complicated with credit default swaps. Starts at
Ops. For investors who owned CDOs, credit default swaps worked like an insurance policy. An investor who purchased a credit default swap paid AIG a quarterly premium.
AIG is an insurance
If the CDO went bad, AIG promised to pay the investor for their losses. But unlike regular insurance, speculators could also buy credit default swaps from AIG in order to bet against CDOs they didn't own. Since credit default swaps were unregulated, AIG didn't have to put aside any money to...
What he said, AIG did not have to put aside any money at all to pay back these CDOs when they went back, which means that they could literally have $0 and still be insuring these CDOs. So, Goldman Sachs sold $3.1 billion worth of CDOs in the first quarter of 2016. Henry Paulson was the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and he ended up being the Secretary of Treasury. The bubble then bursted as people realized what was going on. 99.3% of the house was literally worthless, and home foreclosures skyrocketed. Loaners could no longer sell their loans, and Lehman Brothers and Merrill Lynch were on the verge of collapse. Now, this is extremely important because of the fact that these 2 banks were gigantic, colossal banks in the system now. AIG, the insurance company that was supposed to insure all those loans, owed $13 billion and did not have any money at all to pay it back. Henry Paulson, the CEO, then realized how badly he messed up, and he asked for $700 billion to bail out all these banks. AIG itself was bailed out for $70 billion, and a lot of the other banks were acquired by other banks. However, this did absolutely nothing to help the people that were affected. This cost taxpayers $648 billion. Real estate loss was equivalent to $3.5 trillion. 5.5 million jobs were lost. Countless number of life savings and pensions. And what happened to those involved? Nothing at all. Every major company CEO walked away with their fortunes intact. Angelo Mozillo, CEO of Countrywide, made $470 million, walked away with it. Stan O'Neill, CEO of Merrill Lynch, resigned with $161 million in just severance fees. And Joseph Constanzo, the CEO of AIG, was kept on as a consultant for $1 million a month. Continue. After the crisis, the financial sector fought even harder to fight all forms of reform possible. They have 3,000 lobbyists, more than 5 for each member of Congress, which is ridiculous. And I love Obama with all my heart, and he promised to change things. Sadly, he did not. He continued what other presidents have done and actually appointed more of these criminals to positions of power. The head of the SEC, who was supposed to be regulating these CDOs, and was a former CEO of FINRA, was appointed the head of the SEC. Timothy served as the Secretary of Treasury, even though he was a key aspect in letting all these people get away with it. Now, this is where part of the speech where I just talk to you, me and you, no more economics, no more anything. I am a very cynical person. If you ever talk to me about politics, I don't believe humans have the right mind to be in that in the first place. But you cannot let it get the best of you. If I thought this country was doomed, I would be in the Dominican Republic chilling on a beach, not giving this speech to all of you, and trying to inspire you to do something in life. You see, we're going to be the most informed generation of all time that has ever lived in this country. We, out of all the generations that have come before us, have the power to change things now more than ever before. I know it's corny, don't worry, I know it's corny, but we are the future of America. It's only us who can change what's happened, who can stop all of this from happening in the first place. Regulation could have been put in place. All this could have been prevented, and it wasn't because of these greedy people on Wall Street. And we need to be the generation to not be those greedy people on Wall Street. Although I know I love money as much as all of you. And thank you for letting me speak.